In this episode, learn to branch out with some proven hiring practices from Stephen J. Smith, author and chief hiring expert of ApplicantPro. His approach is genuinely unbelievable.
Stop.
What? Just trying to spruce things up. But really, this will be a fruitful episode for all you recruiters.
Hey there, I'm Krista Vance, entrepreneur and operations leader.
And I'm Matt Vance, award-winning author and social innovation researcher. We're your hosts of the Culture Profit Podcast.
Your place for purposeful company culture strategy.
Learn from HR pros, executives, and thought leaders how to prioritize profits by prioritizing people.
This episode is sponsored by Brigham, the best friend of forward-thinking HR leaders, helping you strengthen your employer reputation as a reflection of your real culture.
Learn more at mobrium.com.
Today we're welcoming an accomplished author, public speaker, and hiring expert to talk about efficient recruiting.
This guy really knows his stuff and has become a good friend of mine since we met over a year ago at an HR conference. Let's give a warm welcome to Stephen J. Smith, Chief Hiring Expert at ApplicantPro. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Oh yeah, here I am. Can I raise the roof? I guess they won't.
There we go.
Okay, so Steve was fired from his first job for illegal activity. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. One of my favorite stories, and I wish my mom was here because she tells it way better than I do. So I was born and raised in Las Vegas, and there's only two things you can do in Las Vegas. You can either gamble or you lizard hunt. And let's just say I was not on the gambling side of things. And so I was really good. My friend and I got really good at catching lizards. We had trap sets all over the desert, and we would catch lizards. Well, I developed this relationship with one of the local pet shops, and he wanted to start buying lizards from me because one of the things I was able to do effectively is I could catch them and they would not lose their tails. And that was a big deal because most of the time, one of their reflexes is they throw their tail off. And so I was really good at this. And so I would sell lizards to this local pet shop. Well, one day I come home from school and my boss is literally sitting in the living room speaking with my mom. And I'm
Wait,
like,
how old are you at this point?
okay, so I'll get there.
Okay.
I'll get there, I promise. So I get home and he's there and he explains the situation. He says, unfortunately, I'm going to have to let you go. And, I'm devastated. I'm like, what do you mean you have to let me go? I'm giving you good quality product. Like I'm providing the right types of lizards and stuff. And he was making some good money. And I was making like $500 a month it was good. It was good money for me. I'd take my friends out to Burger King and buy Whoppers and stuff. But anyway, so in essence, he said that one of the lizards you sold me was an endangered species. It was a horny toad. It's one of my favorite lizards. It's called a horny toad. It has like a little jack-o'-lantern back and horns, kind of like a bearded dragon, but way better, just way better. And they eat ants for the most part. So anyway, so I had sold him this lizard and he said, well, because of this, I got caught and now I have to let you go. And he says, I'm really bummed by this, but the biggest reason I came here to talk with you at your house and talk with your mom. Now, my mom was like, what? She had no idea I was doing this job. She had no idea. And so she was kind of like, what is going on? But he's like, yeah, I have to let you go because I couldn't admit to the people, like when they came in and did the audit, I couldn't admit that my dealer was an 11-year-old. So I was 11 years old. So I got fired from my first job for illegal activity. There you go.
Holy cow, man.
Awesome.
You're getting started early, 11. You're making it happen.
Well, when they took that job away, yeah, it was funny because when they took the job away, I ended up becoming the first paper boy for the area of Summerlin for the Review Journal. And so then I would start delivering newspapers and things like that in the area to maintain my income. So there you go. There's my
get your $500 a month back from doing newspaper routes.
For the most part, that paper route was not as effective, but I would collect cans and bottles and I would talk with the foreman because there was a lot of construction going on back then. and I would clean up. And so they would pay me to clean up some of their little construction sites. And then I would go, basically recycle the copper wire. And copper wire was the best. I get the most for that. It was like 90 cents a pound back then. But yeah, so I would just recycle stuff to try to maintain it. It wasn't, like I said, it was not as effective, but I spent all my money on baseball cards. The baseball craze was going on at the time, and so that's what I did. And I had some Star Wars cards too. So
yeah, that's what we were going to ask you about next. So tell us, for anyone who's seeing this on video, they're probably wondering what this Yoda Christmas tree is. So tell us about it.
So this tree has been up for almost 7 years now. And, in my role, I'm in sales, right? So I do a lot of sales calls, customer support calls, and things of that nature. And it's not necessarily a pet peeve, but I hate when people want to break the ice by talking about the weather. It just bugs me. Like, I don't care about the weather, but what I do care about is Christmas and Star Wars. And so inevitably, like 95% of the time, somebody on the call is going to ask about the tree. They're just going to ask about it. And so they always ask about the tree, which leads to a conversation about Star Wars and Christmas. And so for me, and then I'll show you, for those of you that see the video, there's my topper is Master Yoda himself. And do you want me to show this real quick? I'll explain.
Yeah.
This is made of paper. And so you cut it out of paper. And it's known as a Star Wars snowflake. They have like Harry Potter ones, Marvel, like they got
wow.
patterns online.
Very impressive.
Yeah, I was more akin to the Star Wars snowflakes, but yeah, it takes like 2 to 3 hours to cut out with like a little X-Acto knife. So
wow,
that's fun. But that's why the tree's there, because I don't want to talk about the weather.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something else.
It works on me. It works on me, and then you get to talk about something you like to talk about.
Yeah,
so that's great.
It works out really well.
And I have to say, Steve, you're definitely a man of many talents and very good at finding value wherever you go and whatever the environment is around you, which leads us to how you joined ApplicantPro. Give us a little bit of background about ApplicantPro and what you're up to there.
So I was a recruiter for several years prior to working for ApplicantPro, and this was back in the time when basically it was the recession for the real estate industry, and I was in the mortgage industry as a recruiter. Well, back then there's this concept called an applicant tracking system. They were brand new. They were just coming out. They were helping organizations, post their jobs to the major job boards and kind of funnel them as a hub into an area where you could manage the applicants. Well, back then I was just using Excel spreadsheets. Now I was good at Excel, so I had macros in my Excel, so I could send off automated emails from my Excel spreadsheet. I was kind of weird with Excel, but it was just inefficient, right? And
you're an Excel master, not a Jedi master.
I don't know about a master, but what it could do at the time, it was very primitive when I look at it, right? It was primitive on what I was trying to accomplish. So I met this guy named Ryan Kohler, and Ryan had been kind of asked to build an applicant tracking software for smaller businesses, because back then applicant tracking, it was 5 figures. Small businesses could not afford those types of things. And I thought, well, we need to start targeting this smaller audience. And so he had built the framework for the applicant tracking system. And him and I met in September, I think it was in 2008. And he's like, hey, I'm starting this company. I'd love to bring you on from a sales perspective. You can help me sell this. You have network, you know people in this industry already. And so I was kind of on board. And then it got to the point where the company I was at they were going down fast because the real estate industry was just tanking. And I was like, you know what, Ryan, I'm on board. And so in December, I started with him. And that first year sold about 162 systems to 162 companies. Wow. And we were able to create enough revenue that we just started. I mean, it was really effective. We would start with free trials and get people kind of addicted, if you will, at first, give them the ability to actually use it. And they just loved it. And it was inexpensive. And so I felt like I was giving back to my recruiting roots and my HR community by providing a software service that was much cheaper than what was available at the time. And I was really targeting the underdogs. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to. We were not targeting, we weren't going after the enterprise solutions. We were going after the mom and pop shops and the small companies, 300 to 500 employees at the time. And it skyrocketed. It went really well. So I've been there for 16 years now. And it's just gone well. We have 300 employees, over 11,000 clients worldwide for the most part. And it's fun. It's fun because, like I said, it's my area of expertise. I was a recruiter to begin with. And now that I've worked this for as many years as I have, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot come and go. In fact, I wasn't allowed to go speak in the state of Alabama for a while because I had the gall in one of my presentations, but way back when, to say that Monster and Crew Builder might not be around in the future. And unfortunately, Monster was sponsoring the event that day. And so it was,
Oh, man.
Luckily, I just spoke in Alabama again this year, so I guess they've accepted me back. But it was just funny because we saw where Indeed was going. You know, Indeed is one of the top job boards today based off of search engine technology, which was just a brand new concept. And so I was just excited because we knew where that was headed. And so we partnered with Indeed. And in fact, we're considered a platinum partner with Indeed. We're the only ATS that has been platinum partner 2 years in a row now since they started in 2023. And it's just fun because Indeed will kind of experiment with some of our clients when they have new features they want to add, and we just provide better value to our clients because of this partnership. And there's a lot of rules you have to follow, right? Indeed has a lot of rules, but we educate our clients. We're really big on education. And so that's why, that's part of the reason why I wrote a book and do a lot of the speaking, because I wanted to really educate people on how to effectively hire. So.
Okay, so tell us more about your book and what the inspiration was.
Yeah, so here it is. It's called The Hiring Tree, Laws of Applicant Attraction. And yeah, I'll tell you really briefly. So for the past 10 years, my buddy owns an apple orchard down in Santaquin, Utah. And he was a fourth generation farmer. He kind of took over. And in taking over a farm, he has a family. He's got 5 kids. It's a pretty big family to take care of. And he had a lot of contracts with like Walmart and a lot of the local stores, but there was not a lot of money in that. And so he decided, I want to start going to the markets, and I want to actually go to the farmers markets and give my product directly to the consumers. And he needed help. And so my daughters, I had 3 daughters, and so they came in and they started selling in the markets and helping him set up along the entire Wasatch Front, which is just a mountain range here in Utah. And so we started selling at the farmers markets to the point that our Murray market, we were making anywhere between $2,500 to $5,000 in a weekend for him. And so it became really effective. Well, we talk about apple tree. Over the years, my friend Kent, his name's Kent Pine Farms, Pine with a Y, Pyne. And what he did is he would sit down with me when I would go to the farm, and he would show me how apple trees work. He would show me how to take care of them, show me how to grow them. And so suddenly this analogy came into my mind that, oh my gosh, this is a lot like the hiring process. It's like a tree. Like we all want to go into the orchard and we just want to pick the fruit off the tree. And Indeed, and a lot of these job boards are the orchards, right? We just want to go in and just get all the applicants we want. But there's a lot of leaves you got to sift through. And so what I did is I created this analogy starting with the roots, where you have to have deep roots, and then the trunk, and then the actual branches of the tree. And when you have a balanced tree that feeds the nutrients correctly out to the branches, then you can produce the fruit you seek and actually attract the right types of people to your organization to grow it effectively. Does that make sense? So that's kind of, so the analogy came because my friend would teach me how to do apples, and I just related it to the hiring process. And I created this analogy to kind of educate people on how to effectively develop their own hiring tree for their organization so that you can attract the right fruit. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And when you follow those principles, you're guaranteed to get more applicant flow and better quality. So does that make sense? That's kind of how it was.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
I like the backstory too. And it definitely has a lot to it, especially from your lived experience and working with.
You want to see something cool? I actually have this on my desk. Now, my dog tried to eat this at one point and she stepped all over it, but this is the original diagram that I created when I began the concept of writing the book. That's kind of glared at me. Cool. But this was the actual original diagram. And so I wrote it out and kind of did the branches and the roots and things like that. And so this was the original diagram that I kind of wrote down. You know, some people say they start something on a napkin. Mine was just on a sheet of paper, but yeah, that's my original diagram to kind of start the concept of the book. And then it took about 9 months. Like I actually wrote it for all intents and purposes, I wrote it fairly quickly, but I've been teaching these principles, you know, optimization and algorithms and search engine optimization and marketing principles. And I've been teaching this for, you know, 15 years. And so I already knew the information. It was just a matter of putting it into a digestible book that you could read and actually understand, right? So.
And a framework like that makes it so much easier to relate to, and also to see how the different principles work together. Seeing your diagram is honestly really cool for me, because when I wrote my book, The Review Cycle, same thing. I actually wrote out or drew a picture on a piece of paper, and I ended up going through 6 iterations before the final model was, you know, kind of cemented in clarity. And then that's where the actual content started getting built upon for the book. So it's really neat to see that original.
It's fun.
It's
fun, you know.
There's always a backstory and a lot of effort and lived experience that goes into creating something. So tell us a little bit more. I mean, I know we're talking about fruit here, but give us a little bit more meat.
Well, so if you break the tree into 3 parts, you've got the root system, the trunk, and then the branches. So the root system is really your executive team and employees. You know, it amazes me how often a manager will come to the HR department and just give them a sheet of paper with a job description and say, here, go find me somebody. And that's the extent of the conversation. Too many employers, that's kind of the process. Like, okay, well, here's the job description, verify it's okay, and then we just post it online. I call it the post and pray method. We just post it and pray we get people for it. And so there has to be a lot more communication. So in a tree, it's a taproot system. A taproot is like a carrot. So it's like this huge, long, you know, root that goes about 20 feet into the ground to hold it in place, which is your executive team. And then you have these fibrous and feeder roots that come off of that collect all the nutrients, which is your managers and your employees. If you don't have managers, employees that can feed the nutrients into the executive team that then feeds it up into the tree, you're not going to have an effective hiring process. That's why a lot of businesses, when you first start, employee referrals is usually the #1 way to build an organization. It's one of the branches, but it's the most effective because of this concept of having this communication with employees. When a company's small, you can have much better communication, but as you grow, sometimes that communication breaks down. And so this is trying to help them understand that this communication can't go away. It has to always exist. The trunk part of the process is your application process and your job ads. And I do a lot of education on job ads because too many about 80% of companies today still use a job description as their job ad. But if you think about it, Indeed is a search engine. And as a search engine, your job ad has to be search engine optimized, which means you actually have to spend time on it. You actually have to write it in such a way that the search engine ranks you well so that you can get better traction. And so imagine you spend all this money on the job board, but when they get to your application, they drop out of the process. What a waste of money. And so that's why this trunk part is so important, making sure you're using appropriate job ads and that your application process doesn't stop them from applying or keep them from finishing the application. And so that's why you have the trunk. And then the branches are just the elements. Like the most popular branch is the optimization branch because it deals with search engines, but you have, education, you have your company website, social media now, and even AI to a point. And so there's a lot of branches, if you will, within the tree that, if you only have fruit, if you will, from one branch, like let's say we just use job boards and that's it. Well, that's only one branch. You are limiting the value of your tree and you're limiting the quality of the fruit. And so employee referral programs and educational institutions and other areas where you can also drive traffic, if you will, and produce fruit. That's why it's so important to have a balanced tree. Because if you can imagine, if you have a tree with one single root, as soon as the storms come, that tree's going to fall. It's not going to be able to stay up. But when you have a tree that has multiple branches and it actually looks like a tree, not only is it beautiful, but again, it produces the quality fruit that you need for the rest of the duration of that tree. And apple trees will last about 50 to 60 years. That's a long time. And so if you establish this tree effectively, it should last you a long time. And even when you have kind of like the down times, right? because sometimes the job boards aren't producing as much. Well, then the employee referrals can pick up on that, right? And kind of make up for it. And so when you have this balance, it makes it a lot easier so you don't lose any momentum as you grow the organization. So there you go. That's probably like the elevator pitch, right?
No, it sounds there's so much depth that can be driven from that analogy, and clearly we need to read your book because I'm sure there's even more in there.
I've got my copy here.
One of my favorites is the gopher. You'll read about the gopher in there. So
okay.
There's other elements that impact the tree, not just, and I talk about those elements like the gopher,
Right.
the insects, the bugs and things like that. And those also are part of the hiring framework. And so when you recognize those things, it helps you create a very beautiful tree. So anyway, yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy it. Like I said, but it's designed to educate. And in fact, I had a lady up in North Dakota. She's one of my good friends. Her name is Nicole. She was the state director for North Dakota SHRM for quite a while. She read the book, and I guess in her backyard, she had apple trees. And she said, Steve, I read your book, and I went outside and actually did some of the things, and I have fruit on my tree this year. I was like, wait a minute, you didn't get anything out of the hiring part? She says, oh yeah, I got that too, but the tree, her apple tree actually produced fruit.
Oh man, that's amazing.
What's a dual purpose?
Yeah, two strands of advice here. That's great.
So if you don't mind giving us a little bit more background on one of the particular stories, Steve. I know there's a ghost story in your book.
Yes.
Talk about the insects and the gophers. Can you tell us a little bit more about the ghost story?
So ironically, but also planned, it's chapter 13 of the book. It's the last chapter in the book.
Creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
Coming up.
And it fell right into place. Like, it's interesting when you write a book, and Matt, I'm sure you can probably attest to this. When it just falls into place and it just works, you know you're doing something that is worth your time and it's worth the effort. And things just fell into place with this book. So chapter 13 is about what we deal with in the workplace, which is ghosting. There's this concept, and in fact, did you know that when I was doing my research for this, there's a word called disapparation. Have you ever heard of disapparation?
No.
So disapparation is a Harry Potter term. It was actually a word that was invented by J.K. Rowling, because disapparation did not exist prior to that. And so I use that in the book because I'm just fascinated with the word, right? But disapparation is like they just disappear, right? And that's exactly what happens. So in the hiring process, there are 4 areas. You can lose them at the application, you can lose them at the interview stage, you can lose them during the onboarding and orientation stage, and then you can also lose them once they're employed with you for a certain amount of time and they leave, right? And there's this concept called quiet quitting that entered for a little bit after COVID. But in essence, the roots of ghosting all occurs for the same reasons. And so when you learn how to mitigate ghosting in these parts of the process, where you make it actually exciting for them to work with you and to apply with you and to be onboarded with you, like, this is all about employee retention, but also about the candidate experience as they're going through the hiring process. And so when you learn how to mitigate certain elements there, and the book obviously addresses some of that, then you can actually eliminate ghosting. Ghosting is up almost 28%. It's the highest we've ever seen it in the history, at least in my time in recruiting world, almost 20 years. Ghosting is higher than it has ever been. And it's because applicants are a little apathetic, right? I mean, if you think about it, if you're just posting a job description, it's the same as everybody else. You don't stand out. A lot of people treat it like dating today. They just want to swipe right. If you think I'm cute, let's go for a phone screen type thing. That's what they want, right? And so you have to think about how an applicant applies to that. I mean, think about it. Would you two want to go apply for a job and spend 15, 20 minutes on an application? No, nobody wants to do that. They just want to be able to apply fairly quickly and send their information over and say, hey, if you think I'm a match, okay, let's do a phone screen and actually talk about this and have a conversation and determine if there's a fit there. And so your job ad has to attract the people. Like, if somebody reads your job ad and it just sounds like everybody else, well, when you call them, they're more likely to ghost you. But if your job ad gets them feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear from this company. I hope they call me. This sounds like me. I can't wait to work for them. Like when they have those types of feelings from your job ad, right at the beginning, you start mitigating the ghosting, because they're actually excited to hear from you. They want to hear from you. And too often we just throw the job description up there, which does nothing to excite them about what it's like to work for your organization. So that's what it is. It's not an actual ghost story per se. It's just about the concept of ghosting and how ghosting has impacted the hiring market now more than ever before in the past, and how to truly mitigate it and keep that from happening so you can be just better off. I mean, if you follow the principles of the hiring tree, I promise you will mitigate ghosting. It'll happen.
It may not be an actual ghost story, but it's still pretty scary.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I asked Kent, I was like, Kent, do you have any cool ghost stories on the farm? Because I was totally like wanting some type of ghost story to make a part of it. But he's like, no, we don't have anything. He's like, sometimes Grandpa Pine would let his apple cider sit for a while and then, add a little bit of yeast and it might create some delusional stories, but nothing that. So
at Yeast, you had some good stories to tell, right?
Yeah, at Yeast. True.
Well, thank you for joining us, Steve. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap it up? I know everybody will be able to check out your book. We're going to add a link there and a link for ApplicantPro so you can learn more about both of those. And Steve is an incredible public speaker, so we'll put a link there to follow Steve as well if you're wanting to have him level up your next HR event. So
yeah, the only other thing I would add is AI. AI is kind of a taboo topic for some companies, in part because it may not even be accepted yet in the organization. But the beauty of AI, especially when you look at the principles in my book, I almost need to write another version, the hiring tree, the missing branch, and just do a book on AI. Because AI can be an effective tool to help you rewrite your job ads. When I talk to a lot of people about writing their job ads, they're like, oh, I don't have time for that. Well, guess what? Now you do. Because if you use AI and you know how to feed the right principles into the prompts, you can create a very effective tool that can literally spit out a job ad for you within a few minutes. And you can effectively follow the principles that are already taught within the book. And so AI had just barely was starting to come out when my book came out. And so it was such a new principle. Nobody really knew what it was yet. I wish I had kind of waited, because then I could have added AI as a 14th chapter and just made a whole bunch of stuff on that. But it didn't, which is okay. Timing is everything. But yeah, AI is such a great tool. And I think for those of us who are thinking about it or not quite sure how to use AI, too many people use AI like a search engine. They just want to type in a sentence or two, or they want to ask it a question. Well, you're going to get a Google answer that way. So you have to understand how to effectively use AI. I already created an acronym for it, the term IDEA, IDEA. So and this is what I do. I present on this here's how you effectively use AI. Create your idea, follow these 5 principles when it comes to your prompts, build the prompts, and then use the prompts. And so when you follow that process, you will be very effective at using AI, especially in the HR world. So that part's exciting. I know we don't have time to go over into details on that, but I've already developed the process. Like I said, I should probably just write another part of the book.
Well, hey, you can definitely share more on LinkedIn about that, and I'm excited to hear it. And I had a mentor of mine that he told me, I was trying to figure out something on Excel. He said, sometimes you have to slow down to go faster.
Wow.
You have to figure out what's the right formula to automate your process instead of doing it all manually. And I think the same is true with AI, just like what you're saying to all those people who are writing those job ads. Take some time to figure out how to optimize those prompts. And Steve, your framework there is definitely something that can help people accomplish that. So yeah, thank you for sharing. That was a great ad at the end.
Yeah, and once you get good at that principle, that will save you a lot of time. That's
absolutely. Like I said, I've already taught it at a lot of conferences I've gone to just this year. I just implemented it as part of my And it makes my presentations 90 minutes instead of 60, but it's so worth it. And everybody that we've had those sessions for, they just rave. They're like, oh my gosh, this was the best session of the conference, because I can actually go back to my office now and immediately implement this. And that's, like I said, that's what I'm all about. When we started Applicant Pro, we were really firm on let's educate, because human intelligence is never going to replace artificial intelligence. It is the king. It'll always be king, because you can't effectively use artificial intelligence unless you have an element of human intelligence that already exists in order to use it effectively. So I still, my focus is the human intelligence. I get that from my mom. My mom's a teacher. So I grew up with a teacher my entire life. And so I educate first. And then when you educate, I just feel like it just makes everything better. So
amazing.
Well, thank you, Mom, for that. Shout out to Mom.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much, and so good to have you on today. I'm excited to explore your book more, and everyone, make sure you check it out. And we'll post those links on our highlight article. And thanks for your time today. It was great.
Yeah, no, it's fun. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We'll see you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Culture Profit podcast, and for being a part of our journey to prove that putting people first is best for business.
Today's episode was sponsored by Mobrium.
Want to get more employee reviews and streamline your employer reputation? Visit mobrium.com.
Now go find one way to prioritize your people and watch your profits grow.